Hey everyone, it's Sophia, and I'm so glad you're here. I wanted to share something that happened to me the other day that just completely made my week. You know that feeling of quiet satisfaction, that deep, calming sense of accomplishment? Well, I was swimming in it. It all started with a sale, and, honestly, it felt like magic. I'd been eyeing this beautiful, hand-knit sweater for months. It was way out of my budget, so I just admire it from afar whenever I was in the store. Then, one afternoon, I walked past and there it was, a bright red, sale, sign. My heart actually skipped a beat. You will not believe what happened next. The sweater was marked down 70%. 70. I felt like a genius, a strategic shopping mastermind. It was like the universe aligned just for me. That soothing feeling of finding such a treasure, of knowing I'd gotten something I truly loved at such an incredible price, it just warmed me from the inside out. It was more than just a sweater, it was a little victory. So, let's begin our exciting journey of English improvement together. And remember, I release new videos daily focusing on English speaking and listening skills to help you improve and enjoy your learning journey. Okay, so, you are never going to believe what happened to me at the aquarium last week. I mean, seriously, I still chuckle thinking about it. Grab a cuppa, because this is a good one. You see, I've always loved aquariums. Since I was a tiny tot, the idea of a whole other world, silent and shimmering, just captivated me. So, when my friend Sarah suggested we go to the new Ocean's Embrace aquarium downtown, I was all in. We're talking floor-to-ceiling tanks, bioluminescent displays, the whole shebang. The place was packed, kids shrieking, parents wrangling strollers, the usual delightful chaos, you know? The air smelled strongly of salt and that slightly fishy, almost metallic tang that just screams, ocean, right? Remember those little paper cones of dried seaweed snacks they used to sell at the zoo? It smelled exactly like that, but amplified. We started with the kelp forest. Towering kelp reaching up, swaying in the artificial current, with little silvery fish darting through. It was mesmerizing. I could have stood there for hours, just watching the patterns the light made on the ocean floor. Sarah, on the other hand, was already 2 tanks down, snapping pictures of a pufferfish that looked remarkably unimpressed with her enthusiasm. We saw these tiny, delicate seahorses. They looked like they were made of glass. And this enormous grouper that just sat there, blinking slowly, like some ancient underwater Buddha. There was a tank full of jellyfish that pulsated with an otherworldly light. It felt like stepping into a sci-fi movie. And then, the sharks. Okay, so I'm not usually scared of sharks. I mean, they're magnificent creatures. Apex predators, powerful, sleek. But this tank was something else. It was a circular tank. You could walk through a tunnel that went right through the middle of it. So you were completely surrounded by sharks. Hammerheads, tiger sharks, reef sharks, just gliding silently above and around you. I was completely entranced. I mean, I literally stopped breathing for a second when this enormous hammerhead, I swear it was bigger than a car, swam right over my head. Its shadow fell across me, and I felt this shiver, this primal little thrill, run down my spine. It was incredible. Sarah, bless her heart, was terrified. She kept clutching my arm and muttering about how we were going to be eaten alive. Which, you know, is a slightly dramatic interpretation of the situation, given the thick acrylic separating us. I tried to reassure her. They're well fed, Sarah. We're safe. But she just buried her face in my shoulder. Now, here's where things get interesting. Remember how I said the tank was circular? And how you walked through a tunnel? Well, towards the end of the tunnel, there was this little alcove, a kind of viewing platform. I wanted to get a closer look at this beautiful spotted ray that was gliding along the bottom, so I stepped into the alcove. Sarah, still slightly pale, followed close behind. And then, crack. Oh, my God. You know that moment in cartoons when a character realizes they've made a huge mistake and their eyes bulge out? That was me. I had stepped on the edge of a loose tile, a very loose tile. It tipped, I stumbled, not dramatically, more like a little wobble, but enough. Enough to send my bag, which I'd carelessly placed on the low wall of the alcove, tumbling into the shark tank. My bag. My bag, containing my phone, my wallet, my keys, my emergency chocolate bar, everything, gone, into the shark tank. I stared in disbelief. Sarah gasped. For a moment, we just stood there, frozen, watching my bag sink slowly towards the sandy bottom. And then, the sharks noticed. It was like a scene from a nature documentary, but happening in slow motion, right in front of me. One by one, the sharks turned, their sleek bodies pivoting with effortless grace, and began to circle my bag. Now, I'm not going to lie. Panic. Pure, unadulterated panic. My whole life was in that bag. Not to mention the sheer embarrassment of having dropped it into a shark tank. I could see the headlines now. Woman donates entire life to sharks. I looked around frantically for help. There was a young aquarium employee nearby, looking slightly bewildered. I pointed at the tank, stammering, my bag. It fell in. He blinked at me, then at the sharks circling my bag. Then, bless his soul, he burst out laughing. I was mortified, but he quickly composed himself, radioed for someone, and then, get this, a diver went into the tank and retrieved my bag. The whole thing felt surreal. Me, standing there, dripping with embarrassment, as a diver emerged from the shark tank, holding my soggy bag aloft like some sort of bizarre underwater offering. The sharks, seemingly disappointed, dispersed. The crowd, which had gathered to witness the spectacle, clapped. I thanked the diver profusely, retrieved my dripping belongings, my chocolate bar was a goner, tragically, and retreated with Sarah, who was still giggling uncontrollably. We spent the rest of the afternoon in the gift shop, recovering from the trauma with overpriced plush penguins and a shared sense of disbelief. So, yeah, that was my trip to the aquarium. A little more eventful than I'd anticipated, wouldn't you say? I mean, who drops their bag into a shark tank? Me, apparently. It's definitely a story for the grandkids, right? And you know what the best part is? I got a free yearly pass to the aquarium. Apparently, they'd never had anything quite like that happen before. So, I guess, free sharks for a year? Who knows, maybe next time I'll drop my shoes in. Just kidding. Mostly. Okay, so, you are never going to believe this. You know how I've always wanted to learn how to salsa dance? Like, the proper, swishy skirt, rhythmic stomping, full-on salsa? Well, I finally decided to do something about it. And, oh my goodness, where do I even begin? It all started innocently enough. My friend, Sarah, she's the adventurous one, always dragging me out of my comfort zone, saw a Groupon for beginner salsa lessons. Come on, she pleaded, practically vibrating with excitement. It'll be fun. Think of the cocktails afterward. And who am I to resist cocktails? Plus, the image of me, all graceful and fiery, gliding across a dance floor, was pretty tempting. So, against my better judgment, because, honestly, my rhythm is questionable, I agreed. The day of the lesson arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. I picked out an outfit I thought looked vaguely salsa-esque, a flowy red top, for passion, obviously, black leggings, for practicality, and some strappy sandals. I even tried practicing a few hip swivels in front of the mirror. Let's just say, it wasn't exactly Carmen Electra, more like a confused walrus trying to hula hoop. We arrived at this tiny little dance studio tucked away above a pizza place. The aroma of pepperoni and onions hung heavy in the air, which, let's be honest, wasn't the most inspiring scent for a sensual Latin dance class. The studio itself was cozy. Okay, cramped. Mirrors lined one wall, mercilessly reflecting every awkward flail we were about to inflict upon the world. The music was already pumping, all vibrant trumpets and infectious beats, and couples were already warming up. They looked amazing, fluid, confident, connected. I, on the other hand, felt like a stiff, uncoordinated scarecrow in a tomato-colored shirt. Our instructor, a man named Ricardo, he was Ricardo. Picture this. Tight black pants, sparkly shirt unbuttoned just enough to reveal a glimpse of chest hair, a smile that could melt glaciers. He exuded charisma, the kind that makes you simultaneously want to learn everything he knows and run and hide under a table. He started by teaching us the basic steps. 1 2 3, 5 6 7, he'd chant, his hips swaying like a hypnotic pendulum. Easy, right? Wrong. My feet seemed to have a mind of their own. I stepped on Sarah's toes. I tripped over my own feet. I nearly took out a potted plant in the corner. It was a disaster. At one point, Ricardo actually stopped the music and pointed directly at me. My heart plummeted. "You, with the red top," he said, his accent thick and velvety. My cheeks burned. Was he going to kick me out? Tell me I had 2 left feet and belonged in a pottery class instead? "You are enthusiastic," he finished, with a twinkle in his eye. Enthusiastic? That's one word for it. I think clumsy catastrophe would be more accurate. But, you know what? I persevered. I kept trying, even though I felt like a baby giraffe learning to walk. And slowly, miraculously, something started to click. I started to get the hang of the basic steps. I even managed a few turns without falling flat on my face. It was a small victory, but I felt a surge of pride. Then came the partner work. Oh boy, Ricardo paired us up. Men on one side, women on the other. He explained the lead and follow dynamic, how the man guides the woman through the dance. It sounded simple enough, except when a very tall, slightly sweaty man named Bob, bless his heart, asked me to be his partner. My newly found confidence evaporated like morning mist. Bob, it turned out, was as new to this as I was. Maybe even newer. We stumbled through the steps, colliding like bumper cars in a slow-motion wreck. He stepped on my feet, repeatedly. I elbowed him in the ribs, accidentally, I swear. At one point, we got so tangled up, we ended up doing a weird, improvised do-see-do that involved me nearly head-butting him. I caught Ricardo watching us, his eyebrows raised in what I could only interpret as a mixture of amusement and concern. But, even amidst the chaos, something strange happened. We started to laugh. Bob and I, 2 completely uncoordinated strangers, united by our shared ineptitude, were actually having fun. We laughed at our mistakes. We encouraged each other. We celebrated even the smallest successes. We weren't dancing well, not by any stretch of the imagination, but we were dancing. And that, it turned out, was all that mattered. By the end of the lesson, I was drenched in sweat, my feet ached, and my red top was probably more pink than red. But I was also smiling. A genuine, ear-to-ear smile. I hadn't mastered the salsa, not even close. But I had learned something else, something unexpected. I had learned that it's okay to be bad at something, to stumble and fall and make a fool of yourself. Because sometimes, the greatest joy comes not from perfection, but from the sheer, unadulterated fun of trying. So, yeah, my salsa debut wasn't exactly what I'd envisioned. No fiery passion. No graceful glides across the dance floor. More like a comedic stumble fest with a side of pepperoni-scented air. But you know what? I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because, honestly, it was one of the most fun, liberating, and surprisingly hilarious experiences I've had in a long time. And who knows, maybe one day, with enough practice, and maybe a less sweaty partner, I'll actually be able to salsa like, well, not like Carmen Electra, but maybe like a slightly less confused walrus, right? You know what I mean? Anyway, we have to go back next week. You in? The cocktails afterward are calling our name. And maybe, just maybe, Ricardo will teach me how to do that fancy hip swivel thing. Wish me luck. Learning a new language can feel like climbing a mountain, but remember, every single step takes you closer to the top. Every conversation you avoid is an opportunity missed. Think about it. Each interaction, no matter how small, is a chance to grow, to build confidence, and to discover new things about yourself and the world around you. So, embrace those moments. You'll be amazed at how quickly you progress. You know what can be surprisingly fun? Giving a mini TED Talk. Not a real one, of course, unless you want to. Just pick any random topic. It could be what you had for breakfast or your thoughts on the weather, and imagine yourself giving a little presentation. You could do this while cooking dinner, walking the dog, or even just standing in front of your mirror. It might feel silly at first, but it's a great way to practice structuring sentences and expressing your thoughts out loud. Wishing conversations came naturally. I get it. It's so frustrating when you understand everything perfectly in your head but then freeze when it's your turn to speak. It's like having all the ingredients for a delicious cake but not knowing how to bake it. You know what I mean? It's a totally normal feeling, and so many language learners experience it. Don't let it discourage you. Speaking of learning new words, something I've been thinking about lately. I remember trying to learn the word serendipity and writing it on sticky notes all over my house. Honestly, it felt like magic when I finally used it in a conversation. And you know what? That feeling of accomplishment is truly amazing. So, tell me, what's your favorite way to review new English vocabulary? I'd love to hear your tips. Okay, so, you know how sometimes the smallest things can just make your entire day? I had one of those days recently. It all revolved around stickers. I know, it sounds silly, right? But hear me out. It was a Tuesday, I think. One of those gray, drizzly Tuesdays where the sky looked like someone had spilled a pot of diluted dishwater over everything. I was feeling blah, just generally blah. Work had been a slog, my to-do list was longer than my arm, and I was just craving a little spark of joy, you know? Something to break through the monotony. I decided to pop into this little stationery shop downtown during my lunch break. It's one of those charming, hole-in-the-wall places crammed to the rafters with notebooks, pens, and all sorts of papery goodness. It smells divinely of old books and freshly sharpened pencils. That kind of scent that just makes you want to curl up and write a novel. I wasn't really looking for anything specific, just browsing, letting my fingers trail over the smooth spines of journals and the textured covers of sketchbooks. And then, tucked away in a corner, almost hidden beneath a stack of washi tape, which, by the way, I'm also obsessed with, but that's a story for another day, I saw them. Stickers. Not just any stickers, mind you. These were glittery, iridescent, holographic, utterly mesmerizing stickers. They shimmered and shifted in the dim light of the shop, catching my eye like tiny, sparkling jewels. There were whimsical woodland creatures with flower crowns, planets trailing stardust, tiny teacups with swirling steam, and even miniature portraits of inspiring women. Throughout history, it was a veritable explosion of cuteness and creativity. I gasped, literally gasped. The shop owner, a sweet older woman with spectacles perched on her nose, looked up from her crossword puzzle and chuckled. "Find something you like, dear?" she asked, her voice warm and crinkly like parchment paper. "Oh my goodness," I breathed, still mesmerized. "These are incredible." I spent the next, probably 20 minutes, just poring over the sticker sheets. Picking them up, examining them closely, holding them up to the light to see how the holographic foil danced. It was like being a kid again, rediscovering the pure, unadulterated joy of stickers. Remember that feeling? That rush of excitement you'd get when you'd find the perfect sticker to add to your collection? It was that, amplified by 10. There were so many I loved, it was almost overwhelming. I wanted them all, but, you know, adulting and budgets and all that. So, I had to make some tough choices. I started by picking out a sheet of the woodland creatures. A tiny fox with a daisy crown stole my heart immediately. Then, I grabbed a sheet of the iridescent planets, because who doesn't need a little cosmic sparkle in their life? And then, I saw them. Tiny stickers of vintage cameras. As a photography enthusiast, I couldn't resist. They were calling my name. But, here's where things got a little complicated. I was reaching for the camera stickers when I accidentally knocked over a small display of miniature succulents. Tiny terracotta pots went tumbling, scattering soil and miniature plants everywhere. My heart plummeted. "Oh no," I exclaimed, my cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry." The shop owner, bless her heart, didn't bat an eye. "Don't worry, dear," she said calmly, already reaching for a broom. "Happens all the time." We spent the next few minutes carefully gathering up the scattered succulents and repotting them. It was a bit of a chaotic, messy process, but somehow, amidst the spilled soil and broken pottery shards, I felt a strange sense of connection. With the shop owner, with the tiny plants, even with the dusty floorboards of the little shop. It was like this unexpected little mishap had broken down some invisible barrier, creating a moment of shared human experience. Once everything was cleaned up, I felt a bit awkward, like I should probably just pay for my stickers and leave. But the shop owner wouldn't hear of it. She insisted I stay and chat for a bit. We talked about everything and nothing: the weather, her grandkids, my love of photography, her favorite type of ink pen. Apparently, she's a big fan of fountain pens. Who knew? It was a surprisingly delightful conversation, the kind you have with a stranger who feels like an old friend. And then, just as I was about to leave, she did something unexpected. She reached under the counter and pulled out a small, unassuming brown paper bag. "This is for you," she said, handing it to me with a twinkle in her eye. I peeked inside. Guess what? It was a sheet of the vintage camera stickers. The ones I'd knocked over. And a few extra sheets, too. Tiny cacti, adorable sloths, and even a sheet of holographic rainbows. My jaw dropped. "Oh, I couldn't," I stammered, completely touched by her generosity. "Nonsense," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Consider it a thank you for helping me with the succulents." She winked. I left the shop feeling lighter than I had in days. The gray sky seemed a little less dreary, the drizzle a little less bothersome. It wasn't just the stickers, although they certainly played a part. It was the whole experience. The unexpected joy of finding something beautiful, the shared moment of clumsiness and connection, the kindness of a stranger. It was a reminder that even on the most mundane of days, even amidst the blah-ness of everyday life, there's always room for a little magic, a little sparkle, a little human connection. You know what I mean? It's like, those stickers weren't just stickers. They were a tiny, shimmering portal to a brighter, more joyful world. And sometimes, that's all you need. Just a tiny portal, a little spark, to remind you that even on a drizzly Tuesday, there's still beauty to be found, kindness to be shared, and a whole lot of glitter to stick onto everything. So, you want to hear about the time I learned origami? Oh, honey, it's a story. Buckle up. It wasn't just about folding paper. It was about, well, you'll see. It was autumn. That crisp, golden kind of autumn where the air smells like fallen leaves and wood smoke, you know. I was heartbroken. Properly heartbroken. The kind where even hot chocolate feels inadequate. Let's just call him James, had decided we were better off as friends. Friends. As if. So, there I was, wallowing in a sea of self-pity, surrounded by empty teacups and half-eaten bags of crisps. My flatmate, bless her soul, tried everything. Movies, pep talks, even a disastrous attempt at making me go speed dating. Nothing worked. One rainy Tuesday, she came home with a small, intricately folded paper crane. It was a delicate shade of lavender, almost glowing in the dim light of our living room. "Origami," she declared, holding it out to me. "It's supposed to be therapeutic." Therapeutic? I snorted. My heart felt like a crumpled paper ball, far beyond the healing powers of folded paper. But she insisted. She'd signed us up for a beginner's origami class at this quirky little community center down the street. Now, I'm not exactly the crafty type. My attempts at baking usually end in kitchen fires, minor ones, I swear, and I once knitted a scarf so long it could have doubled as a fire escape rope. But I was desperate, anything to distract me from the endless loop of what if, and if only, playing in my head. So, there we were, on a Thursday evening, surrounded by a mismatched group of people in a room that smelled faintly of dusty paper and old carpet. Our instructor, a tiny, energetic woman named Mrs. Ito, greeted us with a smile that could melt glaciers. She had this twinkle in her eye, like she knew all the secrets of the universe, hidden within the folds of a paper square. The first project was a simple boat. Simple, they said. My fingers felt like clumsy sausages, fumbling with the crisp folds. Mrs. Ito, with the patience of a saint, gently guided my hands, correcting my mistakes, her voice soft and encouraging. I looked around the room. A teenage boy was meticulously crafting a frog, his brow furrowed in concentration. An elderly woman with nimble fingers was already halfway through a complex-looking flower. And me? I was struggling to make a paper boat that looked less like a mangled napkin. I messed up a lot, creased the paper in the wrong places, tore it, even managed to stab myself with a toothpick. Don't ask. I was ready to give up, to declare myself origami impaired and go drown my sorrows in a tub of ice cream. But then, something shifted. As I focused on the precise folds, on the delicate balance of the paper, the relentless chatter in my mind began to quiet down. It was like meditation, but with sharper corners. Slowly, painstakingly, I managed to create something resembling a boat. It wasn't perfect, it was lopsided and a bit wonky, but it was mine. And you know what? I felt a tiny flicker of pride. A feeling I hadn't felt in weeks. Over the next few weeks, I became obsessed. I folded everything. Cranes, frogs, butterflies, even a rather ambitious, and ultimately unsuccessful, attempt at a dragon. My flat was filled with little paper creations, like a miniature origami zoo. I discovered the meditative rhythm of folding, the satisfying click of a perfectly aligned crease, the quiet joy of transforming a flat piece of paper into something beautiful and intricate. The community center became my sanctuary. I started looking forward to Thursday evenings, to the quiet camaraderie of the other origami enthusiasts. We'd share tips, troubleshoot tricky folds, and marvel at Mrs. Ito's creations, which seemed to defy the laws of physics. I even started talking to the teenage boy, the one with the frog folding prowess. He turned out to be a surprisingly insightful listener, with a dry wit and a passion for vintage sci-fi movies. His name was Leo. One evening, after a particularly frustrating attempt at a modular origami star, Leo looked at me, a mischievous glint in his eye, and said, "You know, origami is a bit like life. There are folds and creases, unexpected turns, and sometimes, you just have to tear it up and start again." He was right, James. The heartbreak, the wallowing, it was all part of the folding and unfolding of my own messy, beautiful life. Guess what happened next? No, not with Leo. Not yet, anyway. But something even more significant happened. I started to heal. The sharp edges of my heartbreak softened. The constant ache in my chest subsided. I rediscovered my joy, my curiosity, my sense of self, all hidden within the folds of those colorful paper squares. Origami, you see, wasn't just a distraction. It was a lesson in patience, in perseverance, in finding beauty in unexpected places. It taught me that even from something seemingly simple and flat, something extraordinary can emerge. It reminded me that even when things fall apart, they can be refolded, reshaped, and transformed into something new. And that lavender crane my flatmate gave me? It still sits on my bookshelf, a delicate reminder of that autumn of heartbreak and healing, a testament to the unexpected magic of folded paper. So, yeah, that's the story of how I learned origami. It's a love story, really. Not the kind you'd expect, but a love story nonetheless. A love story about paper, about healing, about finding yourself in the most unexpected of places. And you know what? I wouldn't trade it for anything. Now, how about another cup of tea? Learning a new language can feel like climbing a mountain, but remember, the view from the top is incredible. Be your own biggest supporter while you learn. This means celebrating every small victory, forgiving yourself for stumbles, and trusting in your ability to progress. It's your journey, your pace, and your success story waiting to unfold. You've got this. And you know what? Speaking practice can be so much more fun than just textbook exercises. How about practicing customer complaint handling? Imagine yourself at a cafe, your order is wrong, and you politely explain the issue. You can even do this while cooking dinner. Pretend the vegetables are complaining they're overcooked. It's a light-hearted way to practice real-life scenarios and boost your confidence in a safe environment. It might even come in handy someday. Noticing your confidence improving little by little is one of the most rewarding feelings. Remember that first time you managed to order your coffee correctly? Or when you understood a whole conversation without having to ask them to repeat it? These small moments add up, and suddenly you realize you're speaking more fluently and feeling less hesitant. It's like watching a flower bloom, slow, steady, and beautiful. Speaking of challenges, you will not believe what happened next. I recently tried a 30-day vocabulary challenge and it was surprisingly motivating. It reminded me how much fun it can be to learn new words and incorporate them into my daily conversations. Honestly, it felt like magic. Have you ever participated in an English language challenge? I'd love to hear about your experience. Okay, so, you know how sometimes you get this urge This deep-seated, almost primal need to do something you've never done before? That's how it was with bread. Homemade bread. I'd seen those gorgeous, crusty loaves on Instagram, all golden brown and rustic, and I needed to make one. It felt almost spiritual, like connecting with some ancient tradition. You know what I mean? I'd always been intimidated by bread making. Yeast seemed like this volatile, magical ingredient, something I wouldn't dare to trifle with. It felt like alchemy, something beyond my kitchen witch capabilities. But the Instagram pictures, they kept calling to me. Those air pockets, that sheen, that promise of warmth and comfort. I was hooked. So, armed with a library book, a real, paper book, mind you, none of this digital nonsense, I embarked on my bread-making journey. The book, Bernard Clayton's new complete book of breads, was a weighty tome, filled with grainy photos and instructions that seemed both precise and utterly baffling. I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation, like I was about to embark on a perilous expedition to a far-off land, armed with nothing but a tattered map and a rusty compass. My first attempt? Let's just say it wasn't Instagram-worthy. Picture this. A pale, dense, oddly shaped thing. It resembled a deflated football more than a loaf of bread. It had the texture of a brick, a slightly chewy brick, I'll grant you, but a brick nonetheless. I remember poking it tentatively with a finger, the dull thud echoing my disappointment. The aroma wasn't bad, mind you. It had that yeasty, slightly sour smell of bread, but the taste? Let's just say my husband was very polite. Bless his heart, he slathered it with butter and jam and declared it interesting. But I'm stubborn, you see. I'm not one to give up easily. I reread the recipe, scrutinizing every word, every measurement. Had I added enough salt? Did I knead it long enough? Was my yeast alive? I mean, seriously. How do you even tell if yeast is alive? It's not like it waves back at you. I tried again, and again, and again. Each attempt yielded slightly different results, but none were even close to those magnificent loaves I'd seen online. One loaf was so flat it could have doubled as a pizza crust. Another rose beautifully in the oven, only to collapse into a sad, wrinkled mess when I took it out. My kitchen became a graveyard of failed bread experiments. I started talking to the yeast. Yes, you heard that right. I'd stand there, over the bowl, whispering encouragements like, "Come on, little guys, you can do it. Grow, be fruitful and multiply." I'd even play classical music, thinking maybe that would inspire them. Don't judge. We all have our quirks, right? Then, one day, it happened. I was kneading the dough, really putting my back into it, like I was wrestling a particularly stubborn octopus, and something felt different. The dough was springy, elastic, alive. It resisted my touch, pushing back with a gentle, almost playful force. I felt a thrill go through me, a sense of connection to this simple, ancient process. I was no longer just following a recipe, I was creating something. As the dough rose, I watched it with bated breath, half expecting it to collapse again. But this time, it held its shape, puffing up beautifully, like a sleeping giant awakening. The aroma that filled my kitchen was intoxicating, warm, yeasty, and subtly sweet. I could almost taste the finished product. And when I finally pulled that loaf out of the oven, oh, my friend. It was perfect, golden brown, with a crisp, crackling crust and a soft, airy interior. It was everything I had hoped for and more. I remember just staring at it for a moment, tears welling up in my eyes. It might sound silly, but it felt like a genuine accomplishment, a small victory against the forces of culinary chaos. The taste? Heavenly, buttery, slightly sweet, with that unmistakable tang of sourdough. My husband and I devoured half the loaf right then and there, still warm from the oven. We didn't even bother with butter or jam. It was perfect just as it was. That first successful loaf was a turning point. It wasn't just about the bread, you see. It was about the process, the journey, the sheer joy of creating something with my own two hands. It was about perseverance, about learning from mistakes, about not giving up even when things seemed hopeless. Now, bread making is a regular ritual in my home. I experiment with different flours, different techniques, different flavors. I've made rye bread, whole wheat bread, Even a pretty decent sourdough starter, which, by the way, I named Doughy. And while I still have the occasional flop, let's be honest, who doesn't? I no longer fear the yeast. In fact, I kind of feel like we've developed a mutual understanding. I provide the food and shelter, and they, in turn, transform humble ingredients into something magical. So, what's the moral of the story? I don't know, maybe it's that sometimes the greatest rewards come from embracing the challenges, from pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zones, from getting our hands dirty, literally. Or maybe it's just that homemade bread is really, really delicious. Either way, I encourage you to give it a try. You might surprise yourself. And even if your first attempt resembles a brick, don't give up. Keep at it, because the feeling of pulling a perfectly baked loaf out of the oven? Well, there's nothing quite like it. Trust me, you'll see. Okay, so, you are not going to believe this story. Grab a cuppa, settle in. Because this one's a saga. It's about me, a language learning app, and a whole heap of unexpected stuff. You know how sometimes you decide to do something, like, totally spontaneously? And then it just snowballs? That's this story. It all started a few months ago. I was at that point, you know, where you feel like your brain is turning to mush. Scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. Instagram, news feeds, the same old stuff. I needed something new, something to challenge me, and for some reason, I honestly can't explain it, I decided I wanted to learn Italian. Why Italian? Well, picture this. Sun-drenched piazzas, the smell of fresh basil, the sound of someone expertly making pasta from scratch. Okay, maybe it was partly romanticized, but still, it felt vibrant, full of life. The opposite of my mushy brain. So, there I was, scrolling through app reviews. So many options. It was overwhelming, honestly. They all promised fluency in weeks, like some kind of magic spell. I finally settled on one called Parla, mostly because the little owl logo was cute. Don't judge, we all have our weaknesses. Downloading the app was easy enough. It looked sleek, modern, all clean lines and bright colors. Very user-friendly, or so I thought. I started with the absolute basics. Ciao, buongiorno, grazie. Easy peasy, right? I was feeling pretty confident. Almost cocky. Like, maybe I was a natural language whiz. Then came the grammar. Oh, the grammar. Articles, verb conjugations, genders for inanimate objects. It was like my brain was trying to process a completely new operating system. I felt like I was back in high school, staring blankly at a chalkboard covered in hieroglyphics. You know that feeling? I remember one specific evening. I was sitting at my kitchen table, a mug of lukewarm tea beside me, surrounded by flashcards. The apartment was silent, except for the rhythmic tapping of my fingers on the table. Frustration was building. Why is the table feminine? I muttered to myself. It's a table. It has no discernible gender. My cat, Luna, looked at me with an expression of pure pity. Even she knew I was losing it. The app had these little speaking exercises, where you had to repeat phrases into the microphone. It was supposed to analyze your pronunciation and give you feedback. Sounds great in theory, right? Well, let me tell you. My pronunciation was, shall we say, unique. I kept mispronouncing words in the most hilariously awful ways. One particular gem was, formaggio, which I somehow managed to twist into something resembling, formaggio. The app, bless its little digital heart, just kept repeating the correct pronunciation, patiently waiting for me to get it right. I swear, I could hear a hint of judgment in its digitized voice. But, you know, I'm stubborn. I kept at it. Slowly, ever so slowly, things started to click. I began to recognize patterns, to anticipate the genders of nouns, most of the time, to string together simple sentences. It was like assembling a puzzle, piece by painstaking piece. One afternoon, I was waiting in line at the coffee shop, idly browsing through the Parla app. The barista, a friendly guy with a charming accent, asked me what I was looking at. On a whim, I blurted out, sto imparando l'italiano. I'm learning Italian. It wasn't perfect, but it was understandable. And guess what? He responded, in Italian. A whole sentence. I understood him. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. I left the coffee shop with a latte in hand and a grin that could have split my face in two. The little victories kept coming. I started watching Italian films with subtitles, listening to Italian music, even trying out simple recipes from an Italian cookbook. The world suddenly felt bigger, more colorful. I was no longer just passively consuming content. I was engaging with it in a new, exciting way. Then came the real test. My friend, Sarah, who had spent a semester abroad in Florence, decided to test my newfound skills. We met for lunch, and she launched into a rapid-fire conversation in Italian. I was terrified. My mind went blank. All those carefully memorized phrases vanished into thin air. I stammered, stuttered, and resorted to a lot of hand gestures. It was a disaster. But, you know what? Even through the embarrassment, I felt a spark of something. Not quite fluency, but definitely progress. I wasn't afraid to try. I wasn't afraid to make mistakes. And that, I realized, was the biggest lesson of all. The app itself became more than just a learning tool. It became a portal to a different world, a different way of thinking. I started noticing the etymology of words, the connections between languages, the subtle nuances of expression. It was like discovering a hidden code, a secret language that connected me to a larger community. Now, months later, I'm still not fluent. Not even close. But I can hold a basic conversation. I can order food in a restaurant. I can even understand some of the dialogue in those Italian films I love. And you know what the best part is? The journey. The process of learning, of stumbling, of discovering, of connecting. It's a journey I never would have taken if it wasn't for that little owl logo and a sudden, inexplicable urge to learn about la tavola. The table still feminine, by the way. So, yeah, that's my story. It's a story about a language learning app, sure, but it's also a story about embracing the unknown, about finding joy in the struggle, and about discovering that sometimes, the most rewarding experiences are the ones you least expect. What about you? Ever tried learning a new language? It's a wild ride, let me tell you, but so worth it. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for watching and for staying connected with me throughout this video. It really means the world to me. I'd love it if you'd follow, like, subscribe, and share this video so you can stay updated with new daily content focused on improving your English speaking and listening skills. You know, before we go, it made me wonder, when are you planning your next digital detox day? It is always so lovely to hear what everyone is thinking about, and sharing your plans in the comments is a wonderful way to practice expressing yourself in English and connect with others who are on a similar journey. See you tomorrow, and remember to take good care of yourselves and keep practicing.